SITOP has been offering selectivity modules since 2002, and the successful product family continues to grow. What's the difference between the two device versions, SEL1200 and SEL1400? Let's take a closer look at the devices. Let's start with the highlights of the new SITOP selectivity modules. They have an extremely narrow width of only 45 millimeters, 4 or 8 outputs that can be set between 2 and 10 ampere, and push-in connection technology, as well as an LED status display and a diagnostic interface with free faceplates. They also permit load-optimized and time-delayed switch-on. Whereas the SEL1200 offers the traditional switching function of a miniature circuit breaker, the SEL1400 also has 150% current limitation, as well as active voltage monitoring. But why is a selectivity module necessary? Typically, 24-volt loads are protected by means of miniature circuit breakers. What happens if a fault occurs? For example, a short circuit. The power supply delivers the maximum current and limits the output power. There's a dip in the 24 volts, so that all the load circuits are underpowered. But there's often a delay before the miniature circuit breaker trips. This is due to its thermal magnetic tripping characteristic. Just a few milliseconds of underpowering is already enough to shut down a plant. A miniature circuit breaker's tripping characteristic looks like this. The higher the current, the faster the circuit breaker trips. Wouldn't it be much better if defective outputs were disconnected much more quickly and at much lower currents? Let's take a look at the SEL1200. As you can see, when a fault occurs, the SEL1200 trips much sooner. It also responds to a much lower current, meaning that the other loads are much less affected and the voltage dip is minimized. And because the switching characteristic of the SEL1200 means it is optimally adapted to the switched mode power supply, no additional power reserves are needed. Now, let's look at the SEL1200 in an application example. Whereas traditional miniature circuit breakers have to be specially adapted to each load circuit, it's not necessary with the SITOP selectivity modules, because they safely and reliably protect the connected loads, regardless of cable length or cross-section. In the event of a short circuit, the benefits are clear. The SEL1200 immediately detects the short circuit and disconnects the defective load circuit. Power continues to flow to the other loads without a voltage dip. This prevents a total plant shutdown. The voltage can dip from 24 volts to 15 volts for a maximum of 3 milliseconds in the event of a short circuit. But this poses no problem for most loads. An alternative is the SEL1400 with its limiting characteristic that immediately disconnects the relevant output if the voltage dips below 20 volts. The SEL1400 also features voltage monitoring, which can be especially beneficial for loads that don't conform to the PLC standard. Choose the clever alternative to the miniature circuit breaker, the new SITOP SEL1200 and SEL1400 selectivity modules.